Okay, let's dive right into this. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating and honestly, often totally misunderstood dynamic in human behavior. We're looking at the deep psychological reasons why some men absolutely refuse to chase women. Society usually labels this kind of behavior as aloofness or playing games or just a flat-out lack of interest. But today in this explainer, we're going to break down the source material to reveal the actual profound psychological framework that's driving this. So let's get into it. Have you ever noticed that some men simply never chase? Like they don't double text, they definitely don't beg for attention, and they absolutely refuse to try and force someone to like them. Pop culture, and well, pretty much every rom-com ever made, has essentially conditioned us to believe that true romantic interest requires this relentless, dramatic, sometimes even obsessive pursuit. But psychology, it tells a completely different story. This lack of chasing isn't an absence of emotion at all. It's actually a psychological mirror. It reflects exactly how securely these individuals view themselves and their attachment styles when it comes to relationships.
Section 1. The Myth of Chasing. Rethinking aloofness versus emotional maturity.
Section 2. Self-respect and reciprocity, requiring mutual effort.
So there's a really common myth out there that equates a lack of chasing with a lack of care. You know, that whole "if he wanted to, he would" narrative that we hear literally all the time. But the psychological data reveals something else entirely. Stepping back is actually a massive indicator of self-respect. It's about needing reciprocity. These guys fundamentally value their own peace of mind way above the temporary dopamine hit of winning someone else's approval. The core belief here is simple but incredibly powerful. Affection should never ever be forced. Think of forced affection like a giant psychological tug-of-war. If you've got healthy, secure self-esteem, you have absolutely zero interest in picking up that rope. People with a secure attachment style just don't seek constant external validation. They don't want to play games, and they have no desire to aggressively convince someone to pick them. Instead, it's all about natural appreciation. For them, if the connection is right, it grows organically, kind of like a tree setting deep roots, rather than a rope constantly on the verge of snapping under all that tension.
And this entire dynamic, it completely hinges on reciprocity. These individuals view a strong relationship as a true partnership. It requires active, dual effort. So if they find themselves being the only one initiating plans or carrying every single conversation, they don't double down. Actually, they step back. Because here's a totally fascinating psychological reality. Our brains are actually wired to experience mixed signals as a form of chronic stress, right? So rather than tolerating that low-level anxiety, grounded men prioritize consistency and mutual effort. They just aren't willing to deal with the exhaustion of one-sided attention.
Section 3. Focusing on personal goals, building a stronger sense of purpose. Now, what's really interesting about this psychological profile is how these men allocate their absolute most valuable resource, their time. Psychology suggests that having highly meaningful, self-directed goals actually creates a massive buffer against emotional codependency. So for these men, relationships are just one slice of the pie, maybe say 25% of the whole shebang, and it sits right alongside their career ambitions, their physical health, and their hobbies. They're just as likely to spend a Friday evening at the gym or working on a passion project as they are swiping on a dating app. Romance is a wonderful, welcomed addition of their life, for sure, but it is intentionally not the absolute center of their universe.
Confidence comes from progress, not attention. This right here is a critical takeaway. Psychologists often refer to this as having an internal locus of evaluation. Because they're so incredibly focused on their own ambitions, their internal self-assurance is built brick by brick on tangible progress in their own lives. It doesn't wildly fluctuate just because someone left them on red or, gave them a compliment. Their confidence is deeply rooted in exactly who they are and what they're building, and that keeps them entirely grounded.
Section 4. Patience and careful observation, thinking before acting.
Okay, so not everyone expresses romantic interest immediately. Grounded individuals actually process attraction quite a bit differently than what you might expect. Step 1 is feeling that initial spark. That's just human biology, right? But instead of jumping straight into a frantic chase and acting impulsively, they hit the brakes. They move to step 2, observation. They take their time. They ask themselves things like, how does this person treat a waiter? Do they have integrity? Do their values actually align with mine? And then finally, they reach step 3, assessing true compatibility. They would much rather wait and thoroughly evaluate the real-world dynamics than rush blindly into the wrong relationships simply because of a strong physical attraction.
Section 5. Resilience in facing rejection. Understanding attraction cannot be forced.
Look, at some point in life, everyone faces rejection. It's just a fact. But how a person handles it, that reveals their psychological baseline. Resilient people operate with an abundance mindset. This means they do not view a lack of interest from someone else as a devastating measure of their own self-worth. They accept a no completely. They don't scheme, they don't manipulate, and they certainly don't try to frantically win the person over. Why? Because they understand a fundamental truth. Genuine attraction literally cannot be negotiated or forced. So instead of chasing a connection that clearly isn't mutual, they simply choose to move forward, keeping their confidence completely intact.
So, the crucial point, the real mindset shift, is this. Rejection is redirection, not personal failure. This is exactly how psychologically grounded men reframe romantic setbacks so they can maintain their mental health. A no isn't some deep, permanent critique of their value as a human being. Actually, scratch that, it's more like life simply redirecting them away from a connection that just wasn't right for them. And in doing so, it frees up their time and their emotional energy for a connection that actually is.
Section 6. Valuing genuine true connection. The reality behind the behavior.
As we bring this explainer to its resolution, we really need to shatter the biggest misunderstanding of them all, the widespread idea that not chasing equals not caring. That literally couldn't be further from the truth. This grounded, emotionally secure behavior actually fosters the absolute most vital elements of a healthy, long-lasting partnership. We're talking mutual respect, relationship balance, and genuine connection. These men aren't playing hard to get, and they aren't trying to trick anyone. They're simply prioritizing a mature psychological baseline, one that fosters real, reciprocal relationships, instead of those anxiety-fueled, forced dynamics that inevitably just burn out.
So I want to leave you with this really provocative question to reflect on. Are you chasing attention, or are you building genuine connection? It's an incredibly powerful metric to apply when we evaluate our own relationship dynamics. True connections do not require you to sacrifice your self-respect, play games, or constantly prove your worth. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it provided you with some highly actionable insights into the psychology of human behavior. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.